What's going on, gamers? Today I'm going to be going over how you can create a truly powerful mage in Elden Ring. This build can be easily put together quite early on in the game and is ridiculously strong and fun to play. If that interests you, then stay tuned. Let's come up next. Welcome back, all you guys and girls. As always, for all things gaming, for all things Xbox, then why not hit that subscribe and bell icon? I'll bring you all the latest and greatest content, hints, tips, guides and builds, and just some fun gameplay and reviews of upcoming games as well. But for today, I'm here to show you a build that I've created that I really think shines. It can be put together quite early on in the game to mid-game, does some amazing damage and is very versatile. In fact, all of these items can be obtained by the time you've hit Lucaria Academy. So what I'm going to do, first off I'm going to explain the build while showing you some background footage of what it entails. Then after you've seen whether or not it's the build for you, if you enjoy it, I'll go over all of the items that you'll need to equip in order to make this powerful build. So in the background here I'll be taking on one tree sentinel, and to me these guys are probably one of the worst enemies. I really hate them as a mage. Their shield reflects magic and they've got an awful lot of annoying moves that are quite hard to judge. So for this first encounter we're going to chuck up a glint blade phalanx for a little bit of extra damage. Then we're going to be using our flask, which gives us extra intellect and spell power, and we're going to jump straight over to Terra Magicus for a really nice overall boost of 35% spell power as well. Just after that we're going to switch to our go-to move, which is Magic Glint Blade. This is just hands down one of my favourite skills in the game. So after the initial burst of damage, because we are in close range, we're then going to swap over and start using our sword in order to do massive melee damage. Next up I'm going to be showing you the damage they can dish out on another tough enemy with a really high health pool, and that's in the underground roadside in the capital. So again, if you want to use your flask for that extra damage you can, but most times reserve it for those really toughest foes or bosses. And I'm going to show you the rock sling by swapping over to that now. This skill is absolutely amazing, as not only does it do some nice damage, great for high health tough enemies, because you can also manage to knock them down, you can get in some critical hits and backstabs and such. Now finally I'm going to go over how you can maximise the most damage from this if you're going to be using it on the very toughest enemies. This is going to be your go-to 3-piece combo with a side of how do you like that damage about you. And like I said, for this you're going to probably be reserving it for the big bosses, as it does take a bit of pulling off, but it's well worth doing. So first off, Terra Magicus. Then you're going to use your flask. Again, this is going to boost your intellect and magic damage. From there you're going to swap straight over to what we saw earlier, and that's going to be your trusty dagger, but with determination on it, giving an extra 60% boost. All of these combined gives around about 135% to whatever spell you'll be casting. So now even just on this +6 staff, which we're only going to be chucking out quite a small spell with Magic Glint Blade, we'll be hitting for a massive 1251 per projectile. And all of them are pretty much going to go in unison at the same time, meaning you're going to absolutely knock his head off the bat. Right, so we're going to jump over to the equipment, what you're going to need and why you're going to be using it. Now the first and foremost thing that you're going to want will be this right here, the Azur's Glintstone Staff. Like I said, I've put both of the weapons to +6 because I think you probably could get both of them to that very mid game. It's not going to be so bad with the somber smithing. The Azure Glintstone Staff, in my eyes, is probably the best staff in the game. Even though it's not the highest damage in the game, it still holds up to most of them, but it has the added effect of this right here, and that's that it reduces casting time of all sorceries but consumes a little bit more FP. This, I believe, is well worth it. It's actually a little bit noticeable when you're casting a lot of spells, and because we're spamming that Magic Glintstone spell, it becomes more prominent and much more worth it. This, I think, is just a staple in this build and absolutely amazing to have in any mage build. So at +6, as you can see here, you're going to have 44 physical plus 56 rounding out to 100, and the sorcery scaling is going to be on 226. If I remember correctly, as soon as you hit +5 with this, that's when the intelligence scaling goes up to S rank, which is exactly what you're after. You want to get the most bang for your buck, you want to be getting a lot of damage out from your spells, so definitely get this to +5 as early as you can. Now if you're very early game and you're thinking, well look over there, that's 52 to equip that, I'm never going to have that much intellect. Well, what you're going to do instead, you're going to, first off, you're going to be using whatever staff you've got from the offset, and then make your way over to grab this one just down here, the meteorite staff. This one cannot be upgraded, however it does start off with an S rank in intelligence scaling, and it's got a nice bit of sorcery scaling from the very start, making this the most powerful beginner staff that you can have, and well worth getting for any mage until we can find a little bit better and start upgrading those other staffs later on for late game. Now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to show you exactly how to get every single item, I'm going to give you little hints. There's a lot on my site, so if you want to have a look, have a look. If you just tap the names in on YouTube though, you will be able to find them as well. But if I showed you exactly how to get everything, this video would be about 45 minutes long. Most of you probably will have fallen asleep by then. So what I'll do is I'll chuck on the location markers and such. You can either go from there or you can have a little look on my YouTube and get the full walkthroughs. So for the meteorite staff, the easiest way to obtain this, if you're at your starting location, if you make your way over to the Dragon Burnt Ruins, around about this second tree here, there's going to be a little bit of ruins, and you'll find there's kind of a small hidden cellar. What you're going to want to do is go down there, you're going to open the chest, it's going to be a trap chest, and it's going to teleport you all the way over to over here, the Celia Crystal Mine. Now the enemies hit very hard in this mine. I'd recommend going outside, going all the way down, picking up the grace point, and then making your way out. From there you're going to go all the way down yonder to the streets of Sage's Ruins. In here there's going to be a little building with a dead body. You're going to pick the meteorite staff off of it after killing a few enemies, and then in this same location, just slightly away from that building, you're also going to be able to pick up Rock Sling, which is something you'll probably want for this build as well. Like I said, I'm just going to be giving a few hints. Most of this stuff I've got on my channel, so you'll be able to grab it quite easily with full guides. Hand in hand with the Azur's Glintstone staff, however, which is the main one we'll be using, will be this right here, the Twin Sage Glintstone Crown. This is just a really good mage crown. It looks, I would say, a little bit on the awful side. I'm really hoping at some point they decide to have an option where you can add your mask or headgear as such. At the moment, unfortunately, there's not, so you're stuck looking a little bit like a crazy Burger King guy with a glowing helmet. But in my eyes, it's well worth it because the stats are quite well rounded, with all the way from physical to holy, 4.4, 3.1, 5.2, going down all the way to the bottom of holy, which is 3.8. The stats are quite well rounded, but the main reason you've got this is right here, greatly increases your intellect to the detriment of HP and stamina. It takes off a little bit of HP and stamina, but I think the plus 6 to your intellect is well worth it. So if we have a look with it on, we've got 1148 to our HP and our stamina's 101. If we take it off, we get 11 to our stamina and we get over 100 HP, which is really good to be fair, but we do drop those 6 points in intelligence. So if you want to be hitting a bit harder, this is definitely the way forward as a mage. May well not be what you have end game, but even at end game you could well stick with this. As long as you can roll out the way of damage, this is a great thing to have as your headgear because it will boost your damage and it will make things a little bit easier when you're trying to nuke those bosses and tougher enemies. Now both of those items can be obtained just over here in the Raya Lucaria Academy. You're going to need to make it through a few enemies, you're going to need to make it to a boss room just about here in the debate parlour. After that you're going to need a short trek across some of these rooftops just here and you'll make your way to find both of them, and it's well worth having in this build. Next up, and we've got the Moon Vow. This is just an absolute pleasure to use. If you saw the footage, it does a lot of damage, it's really fast, it's just got some great moves to it. It's got a great add clear move and it's got a great single target move, which adds stagger. Absolutely perfect for getting those crit hits off, perfect for doing a lot of damage, and in my eyes probably one of the best mage pieces of gear you can have on. Like I said, at plus 6 again, it's got physical 136 plus 47 and magic 162 plus 121. Its attribute scaling is mainly off of dexterity and intelligence, so what we're going to do is whack as much as we can into those two. It's going to boost the damage and it's going to help us out of a little bit of our speed casting, and obviously intelligence is going to be the way forward for our build anyway, so we'll be smashing that stat up as high as possible. Also, because it's magic, when we do increase our magic damage, say for example when we're using our Terra Magicus, That's going to increase this as well. It's going to mean you do a lot of extra damage. It's just a really great weapon to use overall in any mage build. In order to get this item, you're going to have to be over in Kaled, and you're going to have to make your way over to the Gal Tunnel. You're going to need to defeat the boss of this tunnel, but ultimately, as long as you've got a bit of health about yourself and you'll get up a little bit, you should be good to go. I would say probably don't come here very early game, because if you're completely under geared or under level, he might well knock you about a bit. But once you've beaten him, you'll be rewarded with that Moonveil Katana. Next up, and a really easy one to go over, and that's this right here. This is going to be one that we'll toggle to if we want insane increase to our magic damage, and that's going to be just any kind of a dagger. I've got a quality dagger, really easy to equip, only needs 5 strength and 9 dexterity, and we're only using this because we want to put on that Ash of War, and that's determination. That's going to give, I believe, between 50 to 60% extra damage with our spell casting. Really worth having. When you use that along with the other stuff we're using, we're going to be able to get a massive 135% buff, so whatever we're chucking at is going to hit like an absolute truck. This one you can obtain really easy from a teardrop scarab that you're going to get. So if you're at the gate front, you're just going to make your way down the road, and I believe it was roughly just before the bridge, round about this location. Knock that one about until you beat it, then you'll be rewarded with the Ash of War determination. So jumping over to the armour set, and we're using the Guardian Garb. We're using 3 pieces of this. I really like how well rounded this is. If you have a little look at the stats, they're all very rounded across the board. So physical is 9.5, holy all the way down the bottom is 10.9. As you can see, it's just really nice, easy one to use. It's going to take a bit of mitigation. If you get hit from range a lot, you can take a bit of mitigation. I find it to be quite a nice, easily obtained piece of gear that works well in most encounters. So we're using the Guardian Garb, the Guardian Bracers, and the Guardian Greaves. To get these, you're going to need to go all the way over into Kaled again, and where you're going to want to go is just over here to the Dragonborough Fork. From here, you're just going to make your way up here, all the way to the top, fighting the enemies that's along the road, and you're going to earn yourself quite a few drops, because I got all of this within about 5 or 10 minutes. Also, it nets you some really nice runes, so if you're trying to get your levels up, this is also a great place to go. If you're thinking that's great, but how do I make it over to this side, the easiest way I found from very early game would probably be making your way all the way over to here, the Third Church of Marika. There's going to be a teleporter just in the bushes. It's going to chuck you all the way up to here, the Bestial Sanctum. Turn around, get this waypoint. From there, you're going to need to make your way down. So it is a little bit of a journey, but it's well worth it, and these are quite easily available. Like I said, also you can be able to do a nice bit of rune farm in here, so you can easily level up if you want to get some more attributes about yourself. Now for your talismans, what I've tried to do is put them in order of importance. That way, whether you've got 1 slot, 2 slot, 3 slot, or all the way maxed out with 4 open talisman slots, you'll know exactly which way to kind of preference them. First one, Radigan Sorcery, just one of the best items in the game, absolutely amazing and well worth having pretty much in any build. As you can see here, it greatly raises the attributes but also increases damage taken. It does mean you take a bit more damage, but if I go over to here, if you have a little look, your equipment load without it drops massively, round about 8 points. You also drop a massive amount of health with 200 points give or take, and you drop some stamina and all of the others up the top there as well. The Vigour, Endurance, Strength, Dexterity all are increased by 5 just from having this on. I would say this is one of the best talismans in the game, and even though you do take a little bit more of a beating, it's well worth it for how much you offset with all of those stats. Now to obtain this one, you're going to need to go over to Kaled again and go to Fort Farith. There are some tough enemies in there. I would say make your way through, find how you've got to get to the location and just run. That's what I did. I picked it up really easy, quite low level, and I haven't looked back since. Next up, and we've got the Graven Skull Talisman. This is going to raise the potency of your sorceries. You're a sorcerer, that's just absolutely amazing. It's pretty much exactly what you're after. If you want to do a bit of damage, make sure to grab this whenever you can. It's well worth having. It's not the biggest boost in the world, but you do definitely notice it, and along with all the other ways that we're actually increasing our damage percentages, it's well worth having in this build. Again, that can be obtained all the way over here in Rare Lucera Academy. Next up, and we've got the Green Turtle Talisman. Nice and easy. The reason I'm using this, it raises your stamina recovery speed. It might sound like something you're not going to use as a mage, but a lot of your skills actually use stamina when you're casting them, so a lot of times you'll find that you're not able to dodge roll straight away because of using your spells. I found this one essential in a lot of builds to do with mage, especially early game. If you haven't got the stats about yourself, this can be an absolute lifesaver. And that one can be obtained all the way over here in the Summon Water Village. It's in a little underground area. It will cost you 1 stone sword key to get. I think it's well worth having for a lot of your builds. Lastly, and this isn't one that you have to have, but if you want to be doing a bit of damage about yourself with the katana, and it will help you to cast a tiny little bit faster, and that's the Prosthesis Wearer Heirloom, which is quite a mouthful to say. All that does is just gives you +5 to your dexterity, so it's helpful, but it's definitely not essential in this build. If you want to get that one, I'd say that's probably one of the tougher ones to obtain. You're going to need to go all the way down here in Kaled to Galry's Shack. From there you're going to get a quest chain. You're going to have to go over to, if I remember correctly, I think it's Inner Aeonia in order to beat a boss, get a needle off him. You're going to take it back to him after that, and then you're going to speak to this lady up here at the Church of Plague. There'll be a little quest chain that goes on for an awfully long time after this, but from the very start of this you'll be rewarded with this Prosthesis Talisman, and you can do the rest whenever you want. It's worth having, I like it, but it's not essential in this build, and it may be something you'll swap out at endgame. Next up, and just one of my favourite kind of summons in the game, and that is Lutel the Headless. I've got this at a +1, it's starting to struggle where I'm getting later into the game. I'd say probably try and get it to a +3 with those Ghost Walks. Should be easily able to mid-game, and it's well worth it because it'll have a bit more health and tankiness about itself. You can obtain Lutel by going all the way down and making your way over to the Tombswood Catacombs. I would say it's probably one of my top 1 to 4 summons in the game, and early game to mid game it is definitely undisputedly the best for myself. It's so tanky, it's so good, it's got good damage, it's got good close range damage, good long range damage, and it gets in and out because it's got a kind of fade in and out move. Really good to have and buys you a lot of time in order to use your spells and nuke the bosses very easy from afar. Next up for our Flask of Wondrous Physic, which you can obtain from the 3rd Church of Marika, we've got the mixing of Magic Shrouded Cracked Tear and Intelligence Not Crystal Tear. This is just going to give you a massive boost to your damage and a nice bit of intelligence, again giving you a boost to your damage. If you're trying to go glass cannon, this is just amazing, but it works well in all builds, and because we're using our sword, which is the Moonveil Katana, it's also going to mean you hit hard with that, because it's got that magic attribute to it. To obtain both of those 2 tiers, you're going to need to come all the way up the top here, to near the Frenzied Flame Village, make it down here, and there'll be a little boss you've got to defeat, and then you'll be able to get them from there. This is a bit of a pain to get to, probably the toughest one because you're going to have to make your way all up here and then down here, but I'd say again, probably still very mid-game. Going over to the spells we'll be using, and my staple is definitely the Magic Glint Blade. This is just absolutely amazing. I really like it because it does not the most damage in the world, but because it creates that sigil in the air, a lot of times before you've aggroed anything, you'll be able to get a massive chunk of damage in. The more mind you've got, the more FP you've got, the more you'll be able to take the enemies down before they've even know what's hit them, because the damage is going to be kind of staggered when these spells decide to proc, which I believe is about 2 seconds give or take. Next up, and we've got Glint Blade Phalanx. This right here is a good spell to have if you've been invaded. It's also a good spell to have early game because it knocks over quite a few of the enemies. If you've got those kind of guards and such coming at you, when these hit them, it can stagger them or knock them down, meaning you can get that nice critical hit off. Overall, I found this one a really nice one to have on, but I'd say it's probably the least essential out of all the skills we've got. Well worth having though, because if you are invaded, it's a nice PvP one to have at pretty much any stage of the game. Next up, and we've got Terra Magicus. This is going to be our buff spell, raises the magic strength of those within the sigil. That's the main thing, you'll want to be within the sigil to get that 35% extra buff. If I remember correctly, when you move out of it, I believe you've got a couple of seconds of the duration still applied to you, so it will work sometimes, but most of the time you'll want to be standing in that sigil and you want to be doing as much damage as you can from afar in that sigil before you've aggroed anything. Just above here, and we've got the Glintstone Arc. This is going to fire a horizontal widening magic arc Use this as your go-to and nice easy to take out enemies if there's an abundance of them and you want to be tapping this a few times over in order to take their health down. It doesn't do the most damage in the world, but if there's quite a few things bunched together, it can knock them about and it can knock them down quite easily after a few of them. Next up, and we've got the Night Maiden's Mist. This one again is obtained by doing the Gallery's quest over in Caelid, which we mentioned earlier. It's going to release a life-sapping silver mist before the caster. Ultimately, this doesn't do the most damage, but it is a perfect area denial, and it works amazing on some bosses and some enemies, especially if they're very slow. For example, Renalia, she gets absolutely smashed to pieces in this, because even though she's got her barrier around her, this goes completely through that and knocks her health down quite easily. Well worth having, it can be the perfect deterrent, or just knock their health about a bit before you activate your other spells. Last but definitely not least, and we've got Rocksling. Just a great all-round spell. If you need a bit of stagger, this is one of the few spells in the game that actually does that. Really seems to help out on those bigger enemies. Summons rocks from the earth and send it flying at your foes. You won't be using this all the time. Most of the time you'll be using your magic glint blade, but when you do need this, as long as it's at your disposal, it's going to make life a little bit easier. And it's like I said earlier, it's found very close to the meteorite staff. Only one I would say, if you did want to swap something out, you could swap one of them out, for example the glint blade phalanx, and chuck on the glintstone pebble instead. It's completely your choice. Obviously these are on a bit of a delay, so if you did want something that hits straight away, the glintstone pebble would be a perfect go-to option. Definitely won't swap out the magic glint blade because it just does so much damage before the enemy knows what's here. Now for your stat allocation, you do not need the level I've got on the right here, but like I said, in this game runes can be easily farmed much faster and much easier than pretty much any of the Dark Souls games I've found, so if you did want to get your level up higher, you really can quite easily in this game. You do not need to be level 92 in order to run this build though, I've had it on for quite some time. What I would say, Vigour is your friend, try and have at least 30 in that if you can. Mind, you're going to want higher than mine at 24, because the more you've got, the much more damage you're going to do to those bosses when you're using those magic glint blades. Endurance, I've probably got a little bit more than I should have here at the moment, but again you are going to want to make sure you've got at least over 20, because you're probably going to want a little bit of weight, plus you want that stamina. Strength doesn't help you in the slightest, we've only got that from the Radigan Sorcery, so don't worry about applying anything to that. Dexterity, you're going to chuck loads into this late game. For early game, mid game, don't worry too much, just have enough to actually equip what you need to. With this one just up here, you're going to need 18 dexterity and 23 intelligence in order to wield this. Other than that, faith, arcane, leave well alone, and you should have a nice well-rounded build in order to take out those foes and do a lot of crazy fun damage to those bosses all the way through the game. Well, you guys and girls, like I said, if you need to see any videos of where this stuff is, most of it will be on my channel. If not, just tap the name into YouTube and it'll come with it nice and fast. I'm sure this video's taken enough of your time and it'd be a lot longer if I chucked every single guide on, but as always, hope it's helped you. I really enjoy using this build, hopefully you will too. As always, for all things gaming, for all things Xbox, take care. I'll see you on the next day.